Hey folks, I haven't posted a video in a couple of weeks, and in that time, the last video that I made ended up on the fun side of the internet. Um, I got lots of dislikes and thoroughly unproductive comments. A lot of them calling me all kinds of names, which you know I I grew up in a household where I was called an idiot, and my skills and I should say family, not household. My skills and abilities and aptitude uh, got questioned all the time. So I those comments do not hurt me. The challenge for me with stuff like that was getting over the kind of counter sense that I started to develop where, oh no, actually I'm smarter and more qualified than anybody else in the room and I could do anything, I just don't feel like it type of, superiority that builds up. Because eventually I got to a point in my life when I realized that was how the people who were saying those things became the way they were, because they then got to the point where they had to push other people down to build themselves up. So, yeah, there's only one genre of insult that hurts me, and unfortunately, that's kind of related to the reason I actually haven't recorded anything in a couple of weeks. A couple weeks ago, I came across some information. I was informed by somebody, I should say, uh, of something that recontextualized something that's been going on in my life for the last year, and I've just been kind of ruminating on that a lot, and ruminating on that at some moments, and then at others, I have been trying to do what I can to avoid thinking about it. So that's the real reason I didn't record. By the way, I'm playing Victoria 3 right now, partially linked to a future video that I hope to make. But that's what I'm up to. Doing something while doing the recording. It's easier for me. I don't have to do 15 gajillion takes that way, and I'm always I always have an easier time focusing when I have something to focus on past the thing that I'm doing in the conversation. So, but yeah, so that's the real reason that I have not been. I haven't posted anything, but I do want to keep things rolling along because I promised to do that, and I intend to. So a lot of these comments that we got, you can kind of see the imprint of sort of self-styled libertarians on them, and that makes sense. Like, I knew I was playing with fire because those are the type of people who tend to be like particularly interested in anything that had, like, if you're talking about tax policy or anything else like that, they're going to be the ones who dive in on it. But like, I remember a time when, 10 or 15 years ago, when a lot of these folks would at least try to make a smart sounding argument. And in the last 10, 15 years, it's reduced down to just sycophantic ruling class worship. And it's always two types of guys. It is guy number one, who is someone who believes, or, guy number one can also be a girl, but it is usually a guy who believes that they understand what poverty is because, they were only allowed to take out their parents' Audi on special occasions, and oh, how deprived! Oh, woe is me! Oh, I have worked so hard for what I have. You have no idea. You know, saying Epstein class is a slur, like that type of person. Whereas person number two is usually either Law enforcement, I should say more specifically police, because I actually work in law enforcement, but you know, a very different kind from the usual. But the police or veterans, and a specific type of veteran on top of that. I actually know a lot of guys who actually were over in Iraq and Afghanistan who are quite progressive, but you know, there are a lot of other veterans who aren't, and they kind of see it as their role to defend and protect the ruling class no matter what, protect the system. So that's the type of guy that you end up getting, and the type of argument that leads to is what we saw, which is just like, why? Oh, like one comment, unironically said, you know, why should the poors feel like they are entitled to anything off of the backs of the rich? You know, all of the classic, oh, you're gonna kill the innovation man, as though like innovation is like this guided spirit that comes out of nowhere and creates wealth out of nowhere, and you know, like there's no process other than that goes into to wealth creation. You know, there's no production value from the people who contribute. You know, and all of these people, like, they have the base assumption here is that the wealthy are not making money off of public financing. The wealthy are not making money off of oftentimes preferential financing from banks and financial institutions. You know, the wealthy aren't being this society that we've built comes at no benefit to them, and so why should they be forced to pay? Whereas back in the day, you would have seen arguments about like credit ratings and the Fed, and like at least an attempt to try to say something that was worth saying. But so I don't really have a lot to play with the comments that we got. But one of the things I wanted to mention, because I did tease it in the video, is the point about how oftentimes higher corporation taxes and higher personal income taxes actually lead to stronger economies and better outcomes. And that sort of thinking really flies in the face of everything that you have been told by media and by politicians and by video games, like the one I'm playing right now. But it's true because, and I feel confident saying that it's true because it's what was going on in this country 50 years ago, you know, and prior to that. You know, from the 1930s until the well, it really started in the 1950s was when we started going in the other direction. But I mean, you can say even in the 60s, 70s, that was the peak period of American innovation. That was the peak period of American industry. That is also when we had the highest corporation taxes in the world. And like innovation is like, that's not a thing you can actually quantify. But, you know, usually when people are trying to make a case about, you know, how much technological progress America's brought, the period of time that they're actually talking about more or less ended when my lifetime started. It more or less ended in the 1980s. And then innovation goes overseas, but conservatives don't want to acknowledge that fact. And they're like, well, who's invented anything else? And it's like, well, first of all, almost nothing truly new has been invented for 50 years. But if you're looking at how things are combined into other things to create a new product that has utility, almost all of that has happened in Asia. And if you're talking about major scientific advances, many of those have happened in Europe over the course of my lifetime in the European economic sphere. But yeah, sure, if you want to talk about like when the transistor was developed, when certain technologies and methods and computers and everything else like that, when and where they came about, sure, that was in the U.S., but it wasn't in this Reaganomics period. It was in this period of peak corporation taxes. There's a reason for that, and it's very simple. It's so simple that people are just going to be like, oh God, that can't be true. But corporate taxes are based off of profits. And this is the part that a lot of, a lot of these folks who are like, tax policy is my thing, I'm a big tax hawk. Really, it's amazing how little they actually understand taxes and how they work. So, corporation taxes are based off of profits, not off of revenues. Those are revenues is all the money that your company is bringing in. Profits is what you have after you've spent everything on that you need to spend on capital projects, on equipment, on inventory, on overhead, on manpower. All right. So everything that you have left after that is your profit. That's what's left over. Okay. When the tax on profits is high, and by the way, profits is what usually then gets distributed in the form of bonuses and dividends and everything else like that. Okay. So, or is used to take out loans, because that's also a big one. So when taxes on profits are high, you have less incentive to have profit when you're done, which means that you invest money back into the company. Okay? So you take more of that money that you have and you invest it in more equipment and more research and development, in higher employee salaries, all of that stuff. So you take those revenues and invest them back into the company so that they don't become profits. Okay? And then, it's the higher income tax catches those inequities on the back end. But so that's how that's worked. That's how that works when worked was the word I wanted. When we had a higher corporate tax structure, when the tax rates were higher and we had a structure to back that up. When you lower that, what you do is you incentivize higher profits, and those profits are then not invested back into the company. They're not invested into research and development. They're not invested into improving the workforce and improving your capital development and the factories that you have right now. That money is taken and it is put into shareholder value. That fun phrase that is bandied about these days, both seriously and mockingly. And when the only thing you care about is shareholder value, then it becomes a lot easier to just give the shareholders dividends, not invest in the company, take out loans that aren't really going toward making the company more innovative or working on technological developments, but are just there so that way you can get bigger shareholder payouts. You incentivize corporate raiders and selling things off. You incentivize relocating companies overseas, because why would we invest in our steel manufacturing capability here in the United States when we can reap the profits and the benefits by moving everything to a cheaper labor market? Okay. So that's what's going on when you lower the corporation tax. That is what Reaganomics does. And as I said, this really started the process of getting this ball rolling started in the late 1950s. I think it was 57 when they created the special little guy capital gains rate, which before that, capital gains were just taxes earned income. So if you sold a stock, if you sold a bond, if you sold a large piece of property, if you did anything else like that under the New Deal income tax system, you got taxed at the regular rate, to disincentivize people gaming the system this way. It was done this way on purpose. All of this stuff was purposeful. It was thought out by people who knew what they were doing. But when you lower the capital gains rate, then you incentivize companies putting more money into dividends and into stock value and not investing it into corporations. Of course, the people who did this, Eisenhower later came to regret having done this, but the people who did this believed that it would lead to record investments in American prosperity, and in reality, all it did was break the model of post-war prosperity. It didn't happen all at once. It took a decade. But that's where, you get the inflation of the late 60s and the 70s. That's when, the offshoring starts. That's when American companies really started to fall behind because there wasn't as much investment anymore. And so things started getting offshored, or, they would send all these jobs went to Japan or to Germany, and so on and so on and so forth. So, yeah, that's that's the most basic explanation. But hey, you know what? I'm actually going to do a video on all of this. And in that video, I'm going to talk about things like gold standard and the Fed and other things like that, and how these policies, the whole avalanche, how this little trickle turned into an avalanche, and how all of these things affected each other. And I'm actually going to give some due to the folks who bemoan the loss of Bretton Woods and all of this other stuff. But I think they have their basic points actually have some validity, but their conclusions are off, essentially, as to where all this started, why and when inflation became such a big driver, and when quality of life started to fall, and why that was. So that's what I'm going to be on about in the next video. In other news, I recently got all caught up with Invincible, because I hadn't seen season 3 either, but I got caught up with season 3 and season 4. And so now I am fully immersed in the controversy of man babies crying on the internet about a character in an adult cartoon getting an abortion. And it's great. I love things so much these days that this is the thing that so many people are focused on online. And also a bunch of people apparently finding out that Invincible was woke for the first time. But these things all lead into, they're all kind of lead into the same thing, which is that, okay, so number one, as I said, man babies. And even though the show does a fantastic job of making women in the show fully fleshed out characters, and especially Eve, these guys fundamentally can't break away from seeing Eve as their perfect girlfriend, right? It's what's the word I'm looking for? they're living vicariously. That's the word I was looking for. So they see Eve as like their perfect girlfriend, and then when, she has an abortion, they can't see her as that anymore. She's tainted in their minds. Like, this happens with a lot of, like, this is not obviously the first time this has happened. This happens with a lot of characters who are very popular, women, characters who are women who get very popular. Is that, like, once the pedestal is broken in these guys' minds, like, oh God, no, now she's not my perfect fantasy girlfriend anymore. But, like, getting to the larger point, it's like, part of me is like, how could these people not have realized before that Invincible was woke? It's like people who didn't realize that The Boys is woke until, like, last season. And it just gets back to this thing that I talk about all the time. I'm sure I probably brought it up on here like once or twice, but, like, conservatives and right-wingers have shockingly low media literacy. And I think that it kind of goes to the larger point of, like, why oftentimes people who are conservatives or lean rightward, they can't make good art. Like, why, like, when you're talking to, and, like, here's the thing is that, like, a lot of these guys, like, they can get very technically proficient. And so the painter Thomas Kincaid is a very technically proficient artist. The paintbrush mustache man, you look at his work, it was very technically proficient. But there was somebody else I was thinking of, but actually his work is not very technically proficient at all, but I'll get back to him. But, like, even when they are able to become technically proficient, they can't really capture audiences. Like, they're whatever they're doing is stuck in its kitsch. It's perpetually stuck in kitsch mode. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that to be a good artist, you either need to have a really good sense of being able to see things from other people's perspectives, or you have to have a really good self-understanding. Preferably the first one. You can get by very well on the second one. If you have both of them, that's wonderful. And, like, that's the skill that right-wingers often struggle with the most. I think about, like, the Daily Wire crap that's made, and Ben Shapiro, who, like, his entire thing seems to be based on the fact that he believes that he is a creative genius, and he's just not. So, like, that kind of falls into that mold. And so I think that when right-wing people, and it's not 1000% across the board. Clint Eastwood is a brilliant director, and he leans conservative, but it's funny how all of his movies are like, so every Clint Eastwood movie, at least for the past, like, 20 years, has been a deconstruction of toxic masculinity, like, toxically masculine tropes, and knocking those down and then building up, like, a more positive vision of what masculinity can be. But it's coming from this guy who identifies as a right-winger, and it's weird. It kind of makes me wonder if, like, Clint Eastwood believes he's a conservative the same way that I believed I was a conservative growing up, but like, he's so much more worldly than I am, so that, I mean, that can't be it. But, like, but yeah, so, like, it's not 100% universal across the board, but, like, oftentimes when conservatives view media, they can only think about, like, they just imprint what they want to see on it, and then they get really upset when it does, like when suddenly it doesn't go their way. Like people who like don't understand, who watch, like Star Trek growing up, and they don't understand the any of the messaging of Star Trek. And so to bend this back to what we're talking about, I think when a lot of conservatives see like Nolan and his redemption arc, or they see like, the little moments that humanize Homelander and stuff like that in the initial seasons, like that's all they're seeing, and they're like, oh, this it me, like, or with the boys, when the boys makes like really sharp critiques of kind of performative progressivism, and like HR, human relations, liberalism and stuff like that, and corporate liberalism. Like they only look at that and they're like, haha, they make fun of liberal, but they don't like understand the underlying concept that's being communicated. Or I mean, with a lot of folks, like, a lot of folks think they're right wing because they're critical of those corporate liberal currents, and they don't realize that, no, like that's also just capitalism. But at any rate, but yeah, it's great. It's great to see another controversy break out, and see how people have reacted to that. So, even when you build up a woman as a character to be like a full character, it just people can't see it that way, and they can't like understand choices, that the other person, their choices and their free will and everything else like that. It's just like, oh no, character dead to me now. My perfect fictional girlfriend is dead to me now. Um, so, uh, what else? What else? What else? Man, I'm trying. I know I had something else to talk about, but I don't remember. Oh, the redistricting. God, yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, what can I say? Like the mode that Republicans and right wingers have been in for a while, where like literally they understand that the the clock is broken. No one's refereeing the process. There's no magical referee who's going to come in and tell them to stop. Once they figured that out, and they figured out that they can just do whatever they want, and these little weenie liberals won't do anything about it, like they do. And the system is entirely set up, and Democrats consented to this every step of the way, because they just wanted to be the top student. They wanted to be, good little achievers and everything else like that, and they didn't understand that they were dismantling everything that held the system in place. And hey, maybe the corporate overlords who sent you to DC, that you work for, did not actually have your best interests in mind in the long run. Um, you know, and they were all so busy attacking the left. Um, if they had used 1/10 of the chutzpah, in going after Republicans that they used in going after any left progressive, then we probably wouldn't be where we are right now. But all of that, yeah, we're in this place now where Republicans are just going to rewrite the rules every single time they get an outcome that they don't like. So, popular referendum in Virginia to counter the redistricting that's going on elsewhere. It just gets overturned by a court that Democrats never bother to try to monitor or regulate or strong arm. They never bother to try to throw their weight around. They never bother to try to build up any momentum. And so it died, but like Republicans now get to rewrite the maps in multiple different states now. You look at Utah. Utah redrafted their maps to give Democrats one seat, and then what did Republicans do? Did they sit there and say, "Oh well, I guess dang, we tried"? Democrats love Democratic elected officials. The people who are surrounded by the consultants and they're on the inside. The 80% of Democratic elected officials versus the 20% who actually try to do things and are worth something. But the 80%, they love nothing more than to say that they tried, and they fear nothing more than having to deal with the consequences of actually succeeding. It is fantastic. They will do nothing to to help you. They will not lift a finger while Republicans and conservatives and the far right are destroying the system, destroying any chance, destroying any chance of there being any power balance. Just obliterating everything, everything that could possibly be a check to them. They will do nothing to help, because at the end of the day, they just got into politics so that people would have to be their friend. but getting back on point, so Utah, that was what I was talking about. So in Utah, they passed those maps, that Supreme Court passed those maps so that, so that there would be one new Democrat district around Salt Lake City. Republicans didn't do what Democrats do. They didn't just say, "Oh shucks, we tried." They rewrote. They ignored. Well, they didn't rewrite. I think they just outright ignored the state constitution to create an independent panel that had jurisdiction over redistricting. They packed the state Supreme Court with 2 new Supreme Court justices. They conducted a harassment campaign against one of the justices who voted in favor of the maps, so that she is now retiring. And now they're going to redraw the maps to eliminate that district. Again, if these little weenie liberals were willing to do 1/4, if they were willing to go just half as far as Republicans and Trump has been willing to go when they had the ability to do so, if they were willing to do that for just healthcare, better employment conditions, childcare allotments, anything else like that. If they were willing to go as far for that as the Republicans are willing to go to literally just completely undermine and destroy the system, imagine where we would be. But we're not there, because the thing is that Democrats never believed in any of those things enough to want to throw an arm like this, to actually play hardball politics the way that they did back in the olden days. FDR and LBJ and Truman did not get all of the things they wanted by being nice little boys within the system. They were willing to actually go out and do something about it. But again, they just cannot visualize, they cannot imagine such a thing. So Yeah, I mean, and if you're like, oh, redistricting is fair, blah blah blah. Why does New England get all Democrats? Um, Dude, there are four, I believe four seats in New England that are actually Republican majority or purple seats. I think it's like the Connecticut fourth, Rhode Island two, Maine second is like a Trump plus 12 district, and one of the two New Hampshire ones. And the Republicans just run really terrible candidates in those seats. That's why they don't hold them. It has nothing like, and then you can I can make the argument about how badly you have to gerrymander Massachusetts to get one Republican seat, because the versus like Tennessee, if you just drew the seats as blocks, you would have two Democratic seats guaranteed. I could get into that, but there's no point in it, because at the end of the day, the argument's not about like what reality is. The argument is about like, oh, me want my man there, so that I can piss off the wokes. But I mean, like, if you really want to go and look into this, hey, go back to the first instance of a mid. So the first instance of that I can think of anyway, other than the 1960s when the VRA came up, the first instance of a mid-decade redistricting was in 2003. It was in Texas. I remember because I was there and I defended it at the time. I defended it because Texas was a Republican state, but it had majority blue. It had a majority Democratic Congress, and it's funny because when they did the redrawing, it actually wasn't done along strictly partisan lines, because a lot of the Democrats that they were trying to draw out actually held seats that have voted mostly for Bush and voted mostly for Dole. They were popular because they were personally popular, and that's what the Republican gerrymander in 2003 sought to deny them. And then once Republicans realized the power of redistricting, that became a huge focus during the Tea Party wave. Pennsylvania had 18 congressional seats. It was an Obama state both times, and it had only 5 Democratic members of Congress. Because of the way that the seats were gerrymandered. So, I don't want to, the Democrats didn't start this. Gerrymandering obviously has always been a thing. But this didn't start. Whatever argument you're going to try to bring up for how this started with Democrats is it's Illinois. Look at Massachusetts. Blah blah blah. Like, no, this started with Republican efforts to make things the way they are. But on that note, I think I'm pretty much spent on things that I wanted to bring up. So, and I want to give my full attention to my fun Victoria 3 playthrough. So, that's what I got. Looking at some of the most important things that are going on right now. But if you have any questions, if there's anything you'd like me to cover, leave a note. I'm going to get on that next video. So either way, take care, everybody. Have a good day.